Alright, so suppose you have a React app like LeadCode and it has many sections like an About Us page, a Contact Us page, a Login page, an IDE page, and each can be toggled by using some tabs or buttons. Now suppose one of the users wanted to click on the Contact Us tab, but he clicked on the IDE tab and then he quickly clicked on the Contact Us tab again. Now a good React app must take the user to the Contact Us section because that's where he wanted to go. So if you want this feature in your React app, then I think you must use a useTransition hook. The useTransition is a hook that lets you update the state without blocking any UI. Now let's just use an example to make this understanding process really quick. So this is the example that we are going to use for understanding the useTransition hook. Now keep in mind I've taken this example from React's documentation, so you can check out the code either on React's documentations or I will just give a link in the description below. Now here we have three tabs: About Us tab, a Contact tab, and a Posts tab. I've mentioned that this part will be slow. Like if I click on this, the rendering of the elements of this section will be slow. Now I made the sections for posts slow particularly because generally we are fetching posts using an API. Now an API can be slow, right? So we are just mimicking that same thing over here using some for loops, or I guess we are using some different thing. We are using this while performance. You can just Google this thing and you will just understand it easily on Stack Overflow. Now, if I change from About to Contact, see, I can just do it really quickly, right? I don't have to wait for this thing to render. Now, if I click on the posts, see, it is taking some time. It took some time to render, right? Now, if I go back to Contact section, this was really quick. This was very responsive. Now, earlier in the beginning of the video, I was talking about some scenario where the user wanted to click on this Contact button, but he actually clicked on this Posts button, and then he again clicked on this Contact button again. Now, a good React app should have taken him to the Contact page directly. But what can happen in your React app if you don't use the useTransition hook is that you might have to wait for some time for this post section to load, and then this Contact page will be rendered. But we don't want that to happen, right? Now, let me just show you what is actually happening in this example. So, if I click on this Posts button, click and then click on the Contact button right away. See, it took some time to actually render this piece of code. Well, that is happening because the post section was actually first rendered and then it rendered this Contact section. But that should not happen. It is just slowing down my React app. So to prevent it, we use the useTransition hook. Now, let me just show you the example where we are using the useTransition hook. So this is the example where we are using the useTransition hook. And if I do this, like, click on this and click on this again. See, it happened seamlessly. This was really smooth, right? So now let me just start by explaining what this useTransition hook actually takes as parameter, what are its return value, etc, etc. Okay. So this hook actually does not take any parameters, but it actually returns an array, and that array has two elements. One is a boolean value and another thing is a function. So if you use class-based components, then you might be aware of this startTransition function. But for the people who use function components, this is just a function which will allow you to create transitions. This isPending value actually returns false when the code inside this setTransition function is actually still running, which means the component is actually getting rendered at that time. So then the isPending value will actually return true, and when the transition is finished, it will return as false. Now this component has a state tab which actually tells us what tab is actually visible to us right now. Suppose if it is about, then the tab will be equal to about. If it is contact, then the tab will be equal to contact. Or if it is post, then tab will be equal to post. Now, as you can see here in this select tab function, I have wrapped the set tab function inside the startTransition function, which means that changing of one state to another state is actually a transition now. That's why we are easily able to transition from one state or one tab to another tab really quickly. Because what we are doing is actually we are just setting low priority for all of these components, like rendering of these components, which means that if I click on this and then click on this, the rendering of this posts component will be given a low priority over this contact button. Now, let me tell you the basics of what is happening behind the scenes when we are using this useTransition hook. So when we change states quickly, what happens is that the first change actually renders first and then the second change actually renders second. Well, this is happening synchronously. Okay, so when we use this useTransition hook, we can actually choose to prioritize the render of one state over the other state. So here we are prioritizing the change in state of each of the components over the other components. Like for this about component, we are prioritizing this contact component because it is not slow actually, whereas this post section is actually quite slow. So it cannot be prioritized over the other things because they will actually render first. But still we are actually prioritizing this post component over the other components. But it is not visible actually because this post component is actually quite slow. Now let's just talk about some pros and cons of this useTransition hook. Well, the first pro is that being the developer of this React app yourself, you can actually prioritize the render of one state over the another state without interrupting the UI. But remember, if you overuse this useTransition hook, then this can lead to slowing down of your React app because of excessive renders. Well, thanks for watching this video. I hope you understood this useTransition hook. And if you want to learn more about React hooks, you can just check out the playlist over here.